This is Wednesday, July the 15th. Do you know the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000? Well, let me read a few verses from the book of John to you this morning. Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he had performed on the sick. Jesus sat down with his disciples on the hillside, and when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" And Philip answered him, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There were about 5,000 of them. Jesus then took the loaves and gave thanks and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted, and he did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces. Wow, try to picture it. It probably in many ways was just an ordinary day. The sun was up, the birds were singing, the children were running and laughing. Well, maybe some were crying because they were tired and they were hungry. But it would soon become a day that all who were there would never forget. It was a day that be read about thousands of years later, like we did this morning. People were crowding to the grassy hillside to be near an extraordinary man. I wonder what kinds of people were gathered on that hillside that day. Certainly they were ones that were seeking a ray of hope. They were the wounded in body and spirit. They had heard about Jesus, the one who drives out demons, heals lepers, gives sight to the blind, hearing to the deaf, and the ability to walk to the lame. They came with their wounds, their broken relationships, their hurts that only God could understand. And some had physical illnesses and conditions that were so gross that only those who loved them could stand to look at them. They came seeking love. They came seeking compassion, acceptance and understanding, comfort and healing. And they came looking for spiritual food for their spiritually hungry souls. They came seeking hope in a hopeless world. I think they were a lot like us, broken, wounded, hurting, seeking. What hurts or brokenness or illnesses are you carrying with you today? Over 5,000 people crowded on that hillside. Imagine there were men and women and children, the young and the old, the rich and the poor, the well-known and the discounted. Some probably came from far distances, others maybe from a nearby town, but all came to hear and see the man from Galilee. And they weren't disappointed. They had followed him through the day and saw him healing the sick and heard and seen his actions of love and compassion and forgiveness and hope. They never wanted to leave his side. And when it grew late, they were still there. As the day began to descend, the disciples became concerned, and they thought the people should be dismissed so they could go to their own homes for food and shelter. But Jesus already had in mind the miracle that he was going to perform. So he turned to Philip and he said, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" Philip was stunned. Buy bread for over 5,000 people? This was a joke, right? Philip exclaimed, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have even a bite. Andrew was brought into the conversation and offered, "Well, here's a boy. He has 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will that go among so many?" But Jesus told his disciples to have the people sit down on the hillside. He blessed the loaves and the fish, and he told them to pass them among the people. It fed them all, and they had 12 baskets of leftovers. Well, the people came seeking many things that day and was given much more than they expected. What are you seeking today? What are your hurts, your wounds, your needs that you want to bring to the foot of Jesus. Our God is a God of compassion and love. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." As the people did that day on the hillside, you and I too can come to Jesus with our burdens, our wounds, and our hurt spirits. He loves each one of us just as much as he loved each one of those 5,000 that day on the hillside. He will help us. He will walk with us through the fire when it seems like it will consume us. He can give us peace in the midst of our distress. He knows and cares about the illnesses that you have and those of your loved ones. He knows how this COVID-19 is twisting our lives into knots. Never doubt, he loves us and will support us through it all. He is always working for our good. Jesus gives us hope for tomorrow and for eternity. That's why he came, to save the lost, you and me, by his death and resurrection. I want to think the people on the hillside went away that day with changed hearts and changed lives. They had met and walked with Jesus. They had seen his love and compassion firsthand. They had experienced a happening that they thought was impossible. They must have been overjoyed and eager to tell all that they had seen and experienced to everyone they met for days and weeks thereafter. We don't always see the miraculous things that God does. And I think it's because we keep him in a box of what our mind says is possible or not possible. But our God can and does do the impossible. There is a children's song that says, "God is so great, so strong, and so mighty. There's nothing our God cannot do. The mountains are his, the rivers are his, the stars are his handiworks too. My God is so great, so strong, so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do for you." How is God working in your life today? Can you see it? Can you trust it? Are you overjoyed and eager to tell your Jesus story? Well, go. Share your Jesus story with someone you meet today. Amen.